Attention, you're listening to The Todd Huff Show, America's home for conservative, not bitter talk and education. Be advised, the content of this program has been documented to prevent and even cure liberalism, and listening may cause you to lean to the right. And now, coming to you from the Full Suite Wealth Studios, here's your conservative but not bitter host, Todd Huff.
My friends, Governor Tim Walz is the most dangerous governor in the country. The most dangerous governor in America. We are watching this unfold in real time. Real people are getting hurt because, in part, of the rhetoric and the recklessness of the governor of the state of Minnesota. This, my friends, has got to stop. And by the way, this man was half a step away from being vice president of the United States. The most dangerous governor in America, Tim Walz, continues to just go scorched earth on the state of Minnesota. We'll talk about this today, some recent developments, including an ambush on a federal officer in Minneapolis. There's lots to get to here today. That's where we're headed. I appreciate you joining us here on this Friday. This is a Friday. Time flies. We're halfway now through the month of January. So that's where we're headed, my friends. Thoughts, questions, feedback, Todd at ToddHuffShow.com. Always sign up for the free email newsletter if you've not done that. ToddHuffShow.com. It's free, called The Inner Circle. We cover what we discuss in this program, along with some other things as well. And we're going to have some other bonuses in for our Inner Circle subscribers as we continue to grow. So check that out for free as well. Friends, are you tired of spending your hard-earned money at businesses that then turn around and support leftist radical causes? People like Tim Walz, by the way. Dangerous politicians. Dangerous people. Leftist causes, leftist candidates, and so forth. That's exactly why we created Freedom Marketplace. Friends, I've said this before. Like it or not, we are facing a battle for the survival of this republic on multiple fronts. I call these the 7 pillars of propaganda. I'm not going to go through that at the moment. What I am going to do is I'm going to tell you that one of those fronts that we're fighting is the woke business world. And Freedom Marketplace has been established to combat that. This is a free searchable directory of businesses who share your beliefs, your love for America. These are businesses that have made a vow not to support leftist candidates, leftist causes. You don't have to create an account. You can do that, but you don't have to. This is a directory designed to help you connect with businesses that are pushing in the same direction you're pushing. You can check it out today, freedommarketplace.net. That's freedommarketplace.net, my friends. Liberty and business for all. Let's give you an update on what's been going on in Minnesota. Minnesota is absolutely, positively a disaster right now. And it's not because the law is being enforced. It's because the law has been ignored for all of this time. And I want to give you an update here. We've of course gone through and talked recently about the fatal shooting involving an ICE enforcement operation, the ICE officer Jonathan Ross, who allegedly shot and fatally wounded Renee Good. We've talked about that on the program. Even yesterday, we talked about how recent reports were that the officer, Mr. Ross, when he was struck by the vehicle, apparently it caused internal bleeding, which gives us a better idea of how much of an impact Ms. Good had when she ran into Officer Ross with her car. Of course, he fires his weapon, and Good was killed. And of course, this is used as an example of ICE exercising excessive force. We've talked about that. That just happened the last week or so. I think it was last Wednesday. Now, there's another incident. Now, this was a non-fatal shooting. This was another ICE enforcement event, an attempted arrest where the officer was ambushed by multiple people. I believe it's 3. The details are still maybe a little bit sketchy here, but an ICE agent was enforcing immigration law, attempted to arrest someone. He was ambushed. He was attacked with the man wielding a snow shovel, a broom or broom handle, and there were multiple attackers involved. I believe that there were 3. The officer fires his weapon defensively. The attacker was shot in the leg. The alleged attacker has survived. And now, of course, we've got more pandemonium, more, just chaos in Minnesota. Newsmax.com is where this article is posted. As always, it's in the stack of stuff, or you can go to their website and find it yourself. Headline here: federal officer shoots suspect in Minneapolis arrest. A federal officer shot a person in the leg in Minneapolis after being attacked with a shovel and broom handle while trying to make an arrest Wednesday, federal officials said. The Department of Homeland Security said in a statement on the social media platform X that federal law enforcement officers stopped an illegal alien from Venezuela. The person drove away and crashed into a parked car. Seems very, very safe here. Before taking off on foot, DHS said. After officers reached the person, 2 other people arrived from a nearby apartment, and all 3 started attacking the officer, according to DHS. Fearing for his life and safety, as he was being ambushed by 3 individuals, the officer fired a defensive shot to defend his life, DHS said. The 2 people who came out of the apartment are in custody, it said. The shooting took place about 4.5 miles north of where Renee Good was killed on January 7th. Smoke filled the street near the site of the shooting as federal officers and protesters squared off. A group of officers wearing gas masks and helmets fired tear gas and grenades into a small crowd while protesters threw snowballs and chanted "Our streets." Earlier Wednesday, a judge gave the Trump administration time to respond to a request to suspend its immigration crackdown in Minnesota, while the Pentagon looked for military lawyers to join what has become a chaotic law enforcement effort in the state. Chaos. He's a governor. Governor Walz is basically presiding over and encouraging, I would say absolute anarchy. Absolute anarchy. Again, this is so fundamentally basic and easy to understand. There are no 2 sides to this. This is pretty cut and dry. The United States government, the federal government, has the authority, per statute, per the Constitution, per what it was created to do, to enforce immigration law. And Minnesota, under the direction of Governor Walz, who, by the way, has encouraged people to resist ICE. What does that even mean, by the way? What does it mean to resist ICE? As I was preparing the show this morning, as I was looking at this and thinking about this and looking at, the narrative and how this is being framed and so forth, it's fascinating to me as I go about looking at this and just thinking about this, the narrative, what's happening. We quite literally have people who are on the side of absolute lawlessness, and they think they're in the right. In what universe is that correct? Listen, that I don't want to get too much into this, but I do want to mention this. I am a Christian, and I don't say that. I just want to explain from the biblical perspective. The rule of law, my friends, is a good thing. We are told biblically as Christians we're to be respectful of government. We're to follow the laws. We're to show respect to the people who are in positions of political power and so forth. That doesn't mean we have to agree with them. We have a system here, and this is something I've spoken about before. We have a system here in our society where our culture, our government here, where we are a nation of laws. We don't have kings. We have a government that's filled with people that have been voted on by us. We don't have leaders, so to speak. We have politicians. We should be committed to the rule of law. That's where our commitment lies. Our commitment should not be all hail the king or the president. These are people who fill a role based upon the votes of the people in the country, the rules of elections and so forth. Probably a little bit of election fraud, which is unfortunate because you're not allowed to even mention that. But this is how it's supposed to be. And so we should be ultimately most respectful to the rule of law, not to the person. Listen, we should be respectful, but we ought to be able to have disagreements. We're a nation that's built upon this concept of self-governance. We gave our consent to the people we elected to do certain things. They do not hold absolute authority over us. We are not subjects to them. You know, you look back at the nation of Israel, they clamored, they begged God for a king. They begged God for a king. God, that was not part of God's plan. He didn't want them to have a king. He gave them a king at their request. So, but they had a king. They had many kings, right? They first had King Saul. They then had King David. They had King Solomon. The nation split. They had kings in the north and the south, northern and southern kingdoms. They had multiple kings. And a monarchy is much different than a constitutional republic. And so we don't have to bow to the king. We don't have a king. We have a president. We should be respectful. We should be able to disagree. We should be able to talk about these things as we talk about them here each and every day. But we should be committed to supporting the rule of law. Now, biblically, Christians are to do this unless the law tells them to do something, unless the law violates a biblical concept or truth. And you'll find examples of that. You go back in the Old Testament to the book of Daniel, and you'll find several examples of people who disobeyed the rule of, the orders of the edicts of the king, King Nebuchadnezzar in particular. And there's other examples as well, but these stand out the most. This is Daniel, where he was not, again, supposed to pray. And, of course, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, they were supposed to worship the king, and they refused to do that. And by so doing, they were thrown into a fiery furnace. And as the Bible tells us, God saved them from that fiery furnace. Great stories in the book of Daniel. In fact, that may be, it's hard to say your favorite biblical story, but that may be my favorite. I love, if you know the story well, they're young, by the way. These are young, very young men, teenage boys sort of age. And Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego are given one more chance to basically fall down and to worship King Nebuchadnezzar. And they say, "Oh, king, we're not going to worship you. We worship God. And our God is able to save us." This is paraphrased. I'm not reading this verbatim. But our God is able to save us from the fiery furnace that you're about to throw us into. And then perhaps some of the most powerful words in Scripture. I think about this a lot. They look at King Nebuchadnezzar, these teenage boys, and they say, "But even if he doesn't, even if you throw us in there and we're incinerated and we are reduced to a pile of ashes, King Nebuchadnezzar, we're still not going to fall down and worship the image that you created, this 90-foot statue or whatever it was of gold. We're not going to do it." And they were prepared to die as teenage boys. That, my friends, is something worth emulating. That is not what we're seeing in Minnesota today. The three young men, the three young Hebrews, did not engage in what the modern left would call resistance, where now they're calling back. They're calling for violence now. They're calling to fight against ICE and against the administration, basically in some sort of a military conflict. They're calling now for, it's actually being done. I've got the receipts here, and they're in the stack of stuff. If you want to read them, we'll get to this. But they're calling for basically military response, people joining a militia and fighting back with weapons. You may have seen another video where a protester on the street is yelling at ICE, threatening to kill them with guns. Specifically, we're going to go get guns and take care of this, and you get the idea. That's not the way. This is pure anarchy, and we should be following the law. This is what we're supposed to do as American citizens, not be falling at the feet of the presidency or Congress or anything else. We should respect and follow the rule of law. We should demand that the law be enforced. Now, you can certainly clamor and protest and say, I don't like the law should be changed. And there can be laws, again, even as Christians, that where we say we can't follow that law, we're prepared to face the consequences. Biblically, they don't. It doesn't really allow for you to take up arms and to threaten to kill the people who are trying to enforce the law. You can disobey the law and face the consequences, but this isn't the way it's supposed to be done. And they want you to believe that they're on the right side of this, my friends. This is dangerous. The rhetoric has been amped up to the 10th degree. This is justified. People believe they're justified in attacking ICE officers, and this is in part because of the rhetoric that's being used by people like Tim Walz. In fact, President Trump went pretty hard after Tim Walz. Tim Walz took to social media to make a direct appeal to President Trump. I'll get to that in a moment. Of course, this is pure sophistry and political gamesmanship and narrative creation here, trying to make himself look like he's the one who's on the side of calm when he, Governor Walz, the most dangerous governor in America, is actually the one that's fueling a lot of this. Quick pause, my friends. Maybe you've reached that stage where managing your money feels more like juggling than just dealing with numbers. Pause here. I got audio coming through. Oz is asking me. There it is. I pulled up this Fox News article, and apparently there's an audio ad that kicked in. Sorry about that. All right, but if you're dealing with things and you've reached the phase where dealing and managing with money is more than just numbers, it's not just adding things up and managing budgets, but there's things like tax planning and estate work, investment choices, and it's gotten a lot more complicated. Family office services may make a real difference for you. That's where Full Suite Wealth brings together all the pieces necessary into one cohesive strategy. Their family office services gives you access to a coordinated team with advanced option strategies, private equity, private credit, legal expertise, all those things under one roof. It's about simplifying your financial life, planning for your future, and making sure your legacy stays strong for generations to come. If you're ready for that next level of support, head on over to fullsuitewealth.com. That's fullsuitewealth.com. Jason and his team will take great care of you. They will help you build your legacy and secure your future. I've got this website. I don't know where I think it was auto playing. There we go. It was auto playing the video that's at the top of the article. So sorry about that. Headline here says, White House slams Walz, Democrats in Minnesota following governor's, quote, direct appeal to Trump. President Trump threatened to invoke the Insurrection Act. We talked about this. I talked about this a couple weeks ago, as we entered 2026. I said things to keep your eye on in 2026 would include this very thing. We knew that this was going to continue to get more intense in Minnesota, and we knew that Trump was going to, again, raise issue with, or there were going to be conversations about invoking the Insurrection Act. The White House pushed back Thursday after Governor Tim Walz told President Donald Trump to, quote, turn the temperature down, following a warning from the president that he could invoke the Insurrection Act over unrest in Walz's state. In a, quote, direct appeal on X, Walz pleaded to Trump to, quote, stop this campaign of retribution, and said that this is not who we are. Oh, my goodness. I hate with the passion of a million suns that statement. There are several statements I hate that people make. Number one, I hate it when people say, I don't like this at all. I think, and the reason I hate it is because it's not rooted in truth. When people say things like, this is my truth, there is something inside me that grinds and fumes and just cannot sit at ease as I listen to that. There is truth, my friends. Let me tell you something. Truth doesn't care about me. Truth doesn't care about you. Truth is what it is. You can agree with it. You can disagree with it. It doesn't matter. Truth is an immovable force. It is what it is. It doesn't matter if every person in the world says it's not true or if every person says it is true. It stands on its own merit. So this concept of my truth, your truth, it's mind-numbing to me. And also the statement, this is not who we are. Oh, it is so condescending to me. It is so self-righteous. This is not who we are. When someone gets caught doing something that they shouldn't be doing, like a celebrity or whatever, what do? They tell us, this is not who I am. This is not what I believe. I'm going to go check myself into rehab. Listen, I'm not against any of those things, but it's just so patronizing to me. This is not who we are. Well, who are you, Governor Walz? You're the one who is, condoning, and I would say encouraging, fanning these flames into what's happening in Minnesota. Stop the campaign of retribution? What does that even mean? People say, well, you're coming after Minnesota because it's a blue state. Well, we're coming after Minnesota because you can see how it's being run. You can see who are the people who have basically put all the tinder into the tinder box, dried it out, threw gasoline on it, and are now holding the matchbook. Who's doing that? It's Governor Tim Walz and these lunatics on the radical left. Got to take a time out, my friends. Sit tight. Back in just a minute. Welcome back, my friends. I really want to spend some time here on this comment that Governor Walz made. Stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are. Turn the temperature down, he told the president. How do you turn the temperature down? What does that mean? Well, that apparently means to not enforce the law. Enforcing the law turns the temperature up. I think not enforcing the law turns the temperature up. I think having a lawless, godless, radical leftist running your state and creating an environment where the people who are breaking the law, who are there in this country illegally, who are basically stealing taxpayer money, which we've seen that story break, when they're on the side of those folks and they're demonizing the people on the other side. That, to me, seems like that's what's turning the temperature up. You cannot say with a straight face that enforcing the law is turning the temperature up. Stop this campaign of retribution. This is not who we are. This is I can't stand it. I cannot stand these words. So, but what is the campaign of retribution? I mentioned it before the break. The idea here is that, hey, Trump is targeting these blue states because they don't politically align with him. Trump is going after illegal aliens in this particular state, in the state of Minnesota, because he doesn't, they don't politically align with him. So he's getting even with them. Listen, I forget which philosopher was the one who said when you have, basically the idea is when you have many laws, you have many lawbreakers. When you have all these administrative laws, then everybody eventually becomes guilty of breaking something, because no human being can possibly know administratively all the ways that the state arbitrarily many times said it's going to be run. And so I am a big proponent of that. We get too many laws that are meaningless. The government has grown into this bureaucratic, in many cases, this blunt force instrument that's used to punish the people who disagree with it. I understand that, and I'm sympathetic to that. In fact, we've watched as President Trump was victimized by that, although Trump would never call himself a victim, and I agree with those sentiments as well. But he was attacked by people who were prepared to wield the power of the government and to use it in inappropriate and illegal ways to do what they did to Trump. And that is reprehensible, across the board reprehensible. But to say that you're enforcing federal immigration law in a city and that these people who are here illegally are being removed, by the way, 70% of these people, according to the data, 70% of these people have been involved in criminal activities. So we're still not down to the level of the people who have been here peaceably living their lives and raising families for 30 or 40 years. Certainly some of those people have been caught up in these things. But again, they are still violating the law, and this is absolutely what the enforcement of the law says. But these operations are designed to get the dangerous people out. And look at the reaction. We've got dangerous people here who are standing up to protect the so-called rights of people to be here illegally, who are also dangerous. The White House responded, and they said Tim Walz, Jacob Fry, and Democrat leaders in Minnesota have done nothing but turn up the temperature, smear heroic ICE officers, and incite violence against them, all in defense of criminal illegal aliens. That was White House spokesperson Abigail Jackson. That's what she told Fox News. She also added this: in Minnesota, ICE has arrested rapists, drug traffickers, domestic abusers, and more, despite Democrat opposition. The Trump administration will protect the American people and enforce the law without apology. The only statement Tim Walz should be making is an apology. Bingo, bango. I agree with that 100%. He has repeatedly compared ICE officers to Nazis and lied about their important work, including his speech just last night. This was her speaking yesterday in response to Walz's speech. I think his speech was Wednesday. So regardless, so you got this battle brewing, and the heat just keeps getting turned up higher and higher, my friends, because it doesn't stop there. It doesn't stop there. In fact, I'm going to pause here. We're going to continue looking at this with the time we have remaining here, the time we have available. But friends, if you're dealing with discomfort, you're just tired of living off prescriptions and managing the side effects, you are not alone. A lot of folks are looking for something natural they can trust. That's why I think you should check out Christopher's Organic Botanicals. It's a family-run natural kratom company rooted in truth, tradition, and transparency. They partner directly with farmers in Indonesia. That's where they get their product. They lab test everything before it ever reaches your hands. There's no hype. There's no synthetics. There's no funny business. Just the real thing done right. Friends, real kratom is not the source of the horror stories you may have heard. The horror stories about kratom, or so-called kratom, comes from shady sellers who are often peddling synthetic garbage that isn't real kratom at all. You can go to their website. You can go to Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com to research. Look into this yourself. See what you think about it once you have all the information. And if you think it's something you'd like to try, you can go to their website and place an order, Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Start with their Kratom Starter Pack. Use coupon code Todd Huff. You'll save 10% off your first purchase. Again, that's Christopher'sOrganicBotanicals.com. Coupon code Todd Huff saves you 10%. Truth, tradition, transparency, my friends. All right, so the rhetoric has been just blown out of proportion. We now have people in the state of Minnesota who are calling for, state and federal conflict, literal conflict being called for by people who are wanting to escalate from, quote, resistance to militancy. That's what they want to do. So now there's activists out there that are not just calling for people to resist, which of course resist is already a code word for doing what they're doing. They're now making explicit calls for militancy, no longer even pursuing the guidelines, their little rules, their word games that say they are trying to do protest. No, my friends. They're now openly calling for militancy. This is at the Washington Free Beacon. Headline here is Tim Walz encourages resistance. Minnesota Ice Watch declares time is ripe to embrace militancy. Minnesota Ice Watch posts guide encouraging escalation by, quote, any means necessary. The Ice Watch group at the center of the unruly demonstrations gripping Minneapolis urged supporters to, quote, embrace militancy and escalate their demands by any means necessary. Hours later, Minnesota governor, the most dangerous governor in America, Tim Walz, also encouraged residents to resist ICE, accusing the agency of carrying out a campaign of organized brutality. So this is the rhetoric coming from the most dangerous governor in the nation's office, Tim Walz. He's saying it's a campaign of organized brutality. He's arguing for resistance to ICE. This, my friends, this literally lays the groundwork. It lays the groundwork for the argument to be made that Trump can issue the Insurrection Act. He can implement this. He's got the baseline to do this now. The Insurrection Act exists to give the president the opportunity, the ability to deal with an actual insurrection where the federal authority is being blocked, is being prevented from being enforced. The president can invoke the Insurrection Act. And that's where we find ourselves. Now, this may be, some people might think that this is a political trap. They're trying to get Trump to do this to help Democrats with politics, the campaign here, the midterms in 2026. That's certainly possible. But this is also who these folks are. Again, they're openly calling for militancy. Minnesota Ice Watch, going back to the article here, which describes itself as, quote, an autonomous collective documenting and resisting against ICE, police, and all colonial militarized regimes. I just can't. I can't when I read this stuff. These people are absolutely lunatics. They shared an Instagram post on Wednesday teaching agitators how to relay information on police and or fascist activity at demonstrations. It says this, and I got to wrap up this segment. We within the belly of this imperial beast face a turning point after 7 full months during which our protests have utterly failed to slow the gears of the war machine. What on earth are they talking about? There's nothing left to do but escalate. The time is ripe to embrace militancy on the ground, both to keep ourselves safer and as a demonstration of our commitment to the words by any means necessary. Calling for military conflict, my friends. These radicals are dangerous and the governor is too. Quick timeout, back in a minute. Welcome back, my friends. Final segment of the week. I want to say this off the top. I try to do this as I can for those that are closest to me. Today is our youngest daughter's 12th birthday. She's 12 years old. This will be the last go-round, the last 12 months where my wife and I have a child who's not yet reached the teen years. She's our youngest. Our other two are, 16 and 14 years old. Now we have one who's 12. Happy birthday, Audrey. She's my little buddy. Anyway, it's a pleasure she's been a blessing. They all have been. So, but let's get back to the issue at hand here today. I want to kind of wrap this up and paint the picture for where we are, because it is as bad as it gets, my friends. We're at a crossroads here. We're at a crossroads, and Trump's not backing down. We know that these folks calling for militancy, as they call it, are not backing down. They're calling for ICE to be stopped using any means necessary. And it's wild. It is so wild to think about. You know, when they talk about these things, when they explain to you in civics class, if that's even still a thing, or government class, they explain how things are supposed to work. This is precisely the way it should not work. And we have a governor, the most dangerous governor in America, who is at the root of these problems. I don't know if he's trying to give himself political cover. There's a lot going on here. They are full of rage. They hate this nation as founded. This is, listen, well, let me break that down after this. I got to make sure that I share one more thing with you before I get into that. Friends, let's talk about something that is important. That is your money. You worked hard for it. But the question is it working hard for you? And is it working hard for what you believe in? Or is it supporting the things you don't believe in, the things that you stand very strongly against? At 48 Financial, they specialize in biblically responsible investing. That means they screen out companies that don't align with your faith, your values, and they'll help you create a plan that fits your goals and your purpose. The best part is they'll show you how your current investments stack up against your values. To what degree? Are they in perfect alignment and harmony? Are they kind of middle of the road, or are they really helping the other side, what you don't believe in? If you take the quick and easy assessment at 48financial.com/Todd, you'll know. They'll give you the results of that, and you'll have that information so that you'll know if and to what degree your investments are in alignment with your values. Again, that's 48financial.com/Todd. That's to take the assessment. 48 Financial, helping you align your money with your mission. Friends, this is not the way that it is supposed to work. But the left, have dug into the trenches here. They've dug into the trenches. They are openly calling for rebellion against the law. They are openly calling for rebellion against the constitutional authority of the federal government. Trump now legitimately has a case to invoke the Insurrection Act, sending in the military to put an end to the chaos and what's happening there. He has an argument. I'm not saying he should or shouldn't at this point. I'm simply saying that he has an argument. This is precisely the sort of thing that the law was written for. This was how this was designed to work. You have a state that is rebelling against the authority of the federal government. This isn't even something that can be argued. In fact, if you look at their argument, which I shared with you, they're saying that President Trump is seeking retribution against the citizens of Minnesota. It's bizarre to think that you would be seeking retribution by enforcing existing federal law. Law, by the way, that's been on the books. These weren't new laws that were created by Trump and the Republican Party here in recent years. These laws have been on the books for a long, long time. They have simply been ignored. But it goes to show just how much the Democrats have politically invested in these laws being ignored and broken. It explains the reasons why Biden did not secure the border, because this touches their voting base. They rely upon, listen, they can say whatever they want, but I am convinced that the left relies upon illegal voters more than we realize. Just like, think about the fraud that was discovered with these Somali daycare scandal stuff in Minnesota. This stuff is part of the process. They know this. Not only does it give them the votes or the opportunity to take advantage of a broken system to affect elections and to affect the way that congressional districts are assigned per the Constitution, and affects how many electoral votes that states have for the president. It affects all those things, this illegal immigration problem. But it also goes to show how much they want to remake America. The left, I've said this before, they fundamentally hate this country as founded. And so a lot of people get caught up on where these immigrants are from. It doesn't necessarily matter. What they want are people to come into this country who don't need to assimilate, who have a different viewpoint, who don't hold dear the principles upon which we were founded, because ultimately that gives them the political means necessary to fundamentally change this country. And that's what they want more than anything, my friends. They hate this country and the Constitution. I gotta go. SDG.